Hey guys, Mr. Klein here, and I am on the Mississippi River Levee, where one day relatively soon there will be a new bridge crossing the river connecting traffic from the south of Plaquemine to the southern part of the Baton Rouge metro area. So when it's done around 2030 or so, it will be the 9th bridge to span the Father of Water south of the 31st parallel. And none of these 9 bridges will be a century old. So in today's episode, we're going to take a look at these bridges and why they are where they are. In the last episode about bridges, I discussed the 3 bridges that cross the Mississippi in and around New Orleans. But what about the state capital? Well, like New Orleans, Baton Rouge is a major hub for rail and road traffic. And into the 1930s, trains on the railroad line north of the city would be broken down and crossed on rail ferries. If you were traveling by car, you had to cross one of several ferries as well. So the most famous was actually right here at the Port Allen Ferry, where U.S. Highway 190's traffic would make their crossing. Now, it was also here where Governor Huey P. Long would famously have his secretary call the ferry and hold it for him. His driver would then drive to the front of the line, cutting in front of everybody, board the ferry, and then leave everyone behind as the kingfish went about his business. So now, while Long said he would make every man a king, it was his hand-picked successor, Oscar K. Allen, who brought timely river crossings to the masses. So with the success of the Huey P. Long Bridge upriver from New Orleans, the state thought it was worth duplicating the bridge on a slightly smaller scale for the state capital. So the result is the other Huey P. Long Bridge, though sometimes it is called the Long Allen Bridge after the 2 governors. So the bridge's primary purpose is rail traffic, just like in New Orleans. And just like there, the trains trundle up a long slope to pass through the through-truss cantilever structure before going back down. Road traffic crosses with 2 lanes on cantilever decks that attach to the main structure, and unlike the original Huey P. Long Bridge, there hasn't been a big maintenance done, so you can still see what, for instance, the original Huey P. Long Bridge looked like. Now, 2 major differences include the railroad ramp being much shorter than the one in New Orleans. So this is actually because of the second difference. So the deck of the bridge behind me is about 113 feet above the river, which is about 40 feet lower than the other ones downstream. So the reason for this is that this bridge is the end of navigation for ocean-going vessels on the Mississippi River. So you see, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers maintains the channel to a depth at 45 feet south of the bridge. North of the bridge near Port Hudson, the river becomes too shallow for huge ships to safely navigate. So the bridge is also notable for having different colors over the years. Older viewers would remember that the bridge was orange. It was painted orange due to the fact that even though it was originally painted blue, pollution from the nearby petrochemical plants tarnished the surface. So rather than continually try to clean the bridge, the state and the railroad, who jointly owned the bridge, painted it orange. So it remained this color until about 20 years ago when the bridge was cleaned and painted silver. So about 5 miles downstream from the Huey P. Long Bridge is the Horace Wilkinson Bridge, which carries Interstate 10, usually very slowly, across the Mississippi River. So this second crossing in Baton Rouge was constructed as a part of the development of Interstate 10, starting in 1963 and opening in 1968 at a cost of $48 million. The through-truss cantilever structure is the highest deck clearance on the lower Mississippi River bridges, with 175 feet. The longest span is about 1,235 feet or 375 meters, and that's one of the longest spans in the United States as well. So the bridge wasn't named after 1, but 3 Horace Wilkinsons, each of which served in the Louisiana legislature for a combined half-century in terms of representing Baton Rouge. So probably the most notable thing about the bridge is how heavy traffic can be when crossing. So the westbound approach is fairly steep, requiring tractor trailers to go into lower gears to climb, meaning that they slow down. So then a significant amount of traffic comes onto the bridge from the nearby town of Plaquemine. So as the 50,000 plus eastbound vehicles cross the bridge, there's a mad scramble of cars shifting lanes. So some need to get into the right lane to exit off to LSU. So others need to get into the left lane to exit onto I-110 that leads downtown. The other through traffic then has to deal with a massive bottleneck as I-10 stays in 2 lanes, but the right lane becomes an exit-only lane, and then the left lane merges into the end of Interstate 110. So 3 to 5 mile backups are commonplace, and since Hurricane Katrina led to the massive growth in the metro area, it's only gotten worse. So the I-10 bottleneck will eventually get solved through an expansion of lanes on Interstate 10 through the bottleneck. So only about 6 more years of that to deal with. So the other strategy to alleviate traffic concerns on the Horace Wilkinson Bridge is to divert local traffic away from the interstate and send it elsewhere. So the calls for a new bridge have grown, ranging from another I-10 span to a bridge further downstream. So as of the recording of this video, the state has narrowed the bridge site down to 2 locations south of the city of Plaquemine. And so what it would do is it would connect US Highway 1 with US Highway 30. So the reasons the state give include that the fact that Baton Rouge has expanded to the southeast. So what that means is that commute times would be shorter, and then also it would keep the cost of the bridge down, since it would be industrial sites and not residential developments that the bridge would be built over. So the downsides of this are that the bridge would drop eastbound traffic onto a 2-lane state highway. And also the project itself doesn't involve increasing the capacity of Louisiana Highway 30. In addition, commuters from either side would still have to travel a long distance to their destination. So as much of this area where the bridge would end would be on the east side is currently undeveloped swampland. As to what it would look like, well, the logo for the project shows a cable-stayed bridge with 2 of the 3 newest bridges in South Louisiana having this design. So it kind of makes sense to assume that this would be the final design as well. So when it would be completed, well, your guess is as good as mine. So considering the need to secure final funding, complete all of the studies and designs, not to mention the 5+ years to complete the project, we won't see this bridge completed until sometime in the 2030s. Before we move on, it's probably a good time to talk about why Louisiana has invested so much money in bridges in the sparsely populated area between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So you see, before the 1960s, you had to take one of several ferries across the Mississippi, and with all the barge and ocean-going ship traffic, this made crossing oftentimes a tricky proposition. So you see, the ferries were mostly state-run, but there were some private ones as well. Operating hours varied, but some were 24 hours. One such ferry was the Luling ferry, which had 2 ferries, the Ollie K. Wiles, which operated during peak hours, and the George Prince, which ran 24 hours a day. On October 20th, 1976, at around 6:15 a.m. with perfect visibility, the George Prince collided with the SS Frosta, a Norwegian registered tanker. Within seconds, the ferry capsized, throwing all but one vehicle overboard and causing the deaths of 78 passengers, most of them trapped in their cars on the ferry, as well as the crew, which ended up becoming the deadliest ferry disaster in U.S. history. So the investigation into the crash makes for hair-raising reading. So, for instance, none of the crew were set on the lookout for traffic as the ferry crossed the river. In the pilot house, while the radar was turned on and the radio was set to the common frequency used by ships on the river, there was no sign that the George Prince ever deviated from its path before its collision, or even attempted to make its location known to surrounding ships. In addition, an almost empty bottle of whiskey was found, and the ferry's pilot was determined to have a blood alcohol level that would be considered legally impaired today. As far as SS Frosta was concerned, both the river pilot and captain were found negligent as well, because they failed to consider that the George Prince's unresponsiveness and also their attempt to maneuver around the ship, they never tried it until it was too late. The aftermath of the disaster led to several things. For instance, mandatory drug testing for ships pilots, formal rules of the river for ships right of way, and most importantly, it intensified the calls for elimination of the ferries on the river and construction of bridges, one of which was just under construction downriver of the accident at the time. A memorial to those killed in the disaster was erected in 2009 near the site of the accident, just underneath the Luling Bridge, and is open to the public. So until World War II, the region was overwhelmingly rural, but in the post-war boom, it was thought that perhaps a river crossing would assist in development. So in the early 1950s, Louisiana sought to create a highway similar to the turnpikes being built in the Northeast. So the idea is that this turnpike would run from Lafayette to New Orleans in nearly a straight line. This plan was known as the Acadian Thruway and was planned to cross the Mississippi River near Donaldsonville. The Interstate Highways Act ended the Acadian Thruway plan by creating Interstate 10, but the idea of a bridge near Donaldsonville persisted. So Louisiana Governor Jimmy Davis championed the project and got it going in 1960. So like previous bridge projects, the bridge was completed on time and under budget, opening in August of 1964. This bridge is similar to the Natchez, Mississippi, Vidalia, Louisiana bridge through its cantilevered through truss design with multiple towers, just much bigger. It's about 8,200 feet in length and has a 170-foot clearance below the river. So the bridge carries 4 lanes of traffic and was a toll bridge from its opening until 2001, with a fee of 50 cents collected on all westbound vehicles. So a crane carried on a barge collided with the main span in 2018, causing the bridge to be closed for repairs for over a year. So for years, critics called it a, quote, bridge to nowhere, as much of the time the heaviest traffic on the bridge would come during sugarcane harvest. However, the construction of state highways that connect the area to the Houma Thibodeau region, as well as the expansion of Baton Rouge's exurbs like Gonzales, have actually made this bridge far more practical than they probably ever enabled originally. So you might be wondering how the Sunshine Bridge got its name. So supporters of Governor Davis wanted the bridge named after him, but Governor Davis opposed that. Instead, supporters got around this by naming the bridge after something he was far more famous for. So you see, Jimmy Davis was a famous country and gospel singer. He even had a #1 hit single published while he was governor. But it wasn't that song, but rather another song he's most famous for. The song, of course, being You Are My Sunshine. It's considered a quintessential country tune. His supporters offered him this name instead, and so that's how the bridge got its name. So about 25 miles south of the Sunshine Bridge is the Veterans Memorial Bridge, which connects the small community of Gramercy to not much else. This cantilever truss bridge was built to replace the Gramercy ferry and was opened in 1995. So the idea was, since the Sunshine Bridge spurred economic development, perhaps the mostly empty west bank of the Mississippi River would have similar success. 30 years on, this hasn't happened. In fact, if you thought the Sunshine and Audubon bridges, spoilers for the end of this video, were bridges to nowhere, they pale in comparison to this one. In fact, for the first decade it was open, the west side of the bridge ended in a dead end, as all traffic would loop around to the river road that passed underneath it, as seen in this photo here. So in 2008, the state completed LA 3213, which connects the bridge to LA 3127, the highway that connects Donaldsonville to Butte and Interstate 310. So the bridge finally has some semblance of a wider economic purpose to it. The other thing that people always comment on is, as you cross the bridge, is the aluminum oxide plant on the east bank. It's actually the only plant of its type remaining in the United States that processes raw materials to smelt aluminum. And ships docked there come straight from Jamaica, where the bauxite is mined. So about 25 miles downriver of the Veterans Memorial Bridge is a bridge I've mentioned a couple times in passing. So if you remember in the last video, the I-410 project was supposed to provide a southern loop around the New Orleans metro area and include Mississippi River crossings at each end. So while most of the project was discarded, the western 12 miles of the project actually survived, as it allowed I-10 to connect with US 90 outside of New Orleans, also providing more access to the Louis Armstrong International Airport. So named after the US congressman who championed the interstate highway system while in office, and also because he disappeared in a plane crash in Alaska in 1972, the Hale Boggs Memorial Bridge was opened in 1983 after 7 years of construction, as well as $135 million in costs, and was one of the first cabled stayed bridges to be built in the United States. So unlike truss and cantilever bridges, cable-stayed bridges hold up the road deck through a series of cables that run from the deck to the towers. Now, which is different than a suspension bridge, because what a suspension bridge does is it connects the deck to the cable through a series of smaller vertical cables. The design also includes weathered steel towers, which are designed to rust in a manner that creates a protective patina, much like copper roofs or the Statue of Liberty, which means there would be no need to paint the superstructure. However, the design hasn't been without its issues, as the humid Louisiana climate caused the towers to rust at a much faster rate than anticipated. In addition, poor ventilation caused the interiors of the towers to rust as well. And most worryingly, the polyethylene coatings for the cables had cracked even before installation. and deterioration of the cables caused them to be replaced in 2009. This bridge, along with the Veterans Memorials Bridge, spelled the doom of the river ferries in the area, with the last being closed in 2013 due to declining usage. Personally, it's probably my favorite bridge out of all the river crossings. So first off, it looks different than the other bridges built before then. The brown towers and white cables provide a stark contrast with the blue sky and the green of the swamp of the surrounding areas, which is really designy of me. Also, when you're at the top of the bridge, there's a great view of the New Orleans skyline and several grain elevators in the area. As a result, there's always river traffic to observe. Plus, the traffic on the bridge is not terrible, which means I can get over my bridge anxiety pretty quickly. Finally, we head north past Baton Rouge to Louisiana's newest and most curious river crossing. So behind me here is the John James Audubon Bridge, which connects the communities of New Roads and St. Francisville. So like the Hale Boggs Bridge, the Audubon Bridge is cable-stayed with bright colors that contrast with the green and brown of the surrounding area. It has a 1,583-foot span that rises 65 feet above the river and carries 4 lanes of traffic. So it's named after the famous naturalist known for his bird paintings, and he spent some time in St. Francisville. So the bridge opened in 2011 at a cost of just under $400 million, replacing the ferry that connected the two communities. So the bridge has attracted a large amount of criticism for a variety of reasons. So first off, the name itself was a controversy in the Louisiana legislature because Audubon did live in St. Francisville. He only did for 1 year. So instead, legislators proposed that the bridge be named after 2 U.S. Marine Corps commandants that were from the parishes the bridge connects. So John A. Lejeune and Robert H. Hale. So much complaining ensued and a compromise was eventually made. The western approach to the bridge in Point Capee Parish was named after Lejeune, and the eastern approach in West Feliciana Parish was named after Hale. Politics, eh? Some more practical complaints about the bridge include that when the project was approved, the bridge was only supposed to cost about $50 million and take 5 years to complete, with an opening date of 1998. Instead, it cost over 8 times as much and opened over a decade behind schedule. So the site of the bridge itself has attracted considerable criticism because city officials in St. Francisville didn't want a bridge to spoil the views of the historic homes along the river. So what happened is now it's south about 3 miles from the town. Also, the bridge is extremely close to the Big Cajun 2 coal-fired power plant and Entergy's River Bend nuclear power plant. So as Wikipedia and locals have pointed out to me, if there was ever an emergency at River Bend, the bridge couldn't be used as an evacuation route for St. Francisville. Finally, the bridge hasn't been proven to provide the economic growth that was expected when the bridge was built. So less than 9,000 vehicles cross the bridge daily, and you can actually ride your bike across it from end to end and most likely not be bothered by more than 1 or 2 cars. So while this is many times the number of cars greater serviced by the ferry, it makes you wonder whether the $400 million was well spent considering the traffic jams that plague bridges downstream. So there you have it, the bridges of the Mississippi River in South Louisiana. So I really enjoyed making these videos because 1, it's been a while, and 2, there were a whole lot of interesting detours I took in getting to research, as well as coming out and come to places that I've never been before and driving down highways I've never been. It's been really interesting to see how these massive structures dominate the landscape and provide a view of South Louisiana you can't get otherwise while crossing. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you like more content like this. If you got any interesting stories about any of these bridges, please put them in the comments below, and thanks for watching.